Welcome to Talent Titans, the podcast where we bring you entrepreneurs and leaders from the global staffing industry. I'm your host, Suki Sodi. Now let's jump right on in and welcome today's Titan.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Talent Titans. I have got a really interesting conversation happening today, and it's all around that whole entrepreneurial piece. But before we go there, I'm going to introduce today's guest, Claire Collins. Claire, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Suki.
Well, thank me after we know what you talk about and what you say, right?
What you've got me into.
Yeah. Just give everybody just a quick 30,000 view of who Claire is.
Okay. Claire is Claire Collins. I'm based over in the UK. I have just recently set up on my own with a consultancy called Ammolite Consulting, focusing very much on sort of small recruitments type of business where I'm working with some sort of a small select group of companies, as well as working with people with regard to retention. I'm a great believer in the behavioural assessment, so I use one called Drake P3. So I work with individuals on career coaching and companies with getting the best out of their people regarding communication and learning about them pre-hire.
Amazing.
Snapshot.
Perfect. Right. So the piece we want to talk about today is starting your own business at the stage of life you did. Let's start with the why. I'm not going to tell people your age, but
okay. I'm not ashamed, so I will.
Oh, there you go. Right. So tell people your story. How, like 5 years ago, did you think today we'd be having a conversation and you'd be self-employed? So tell people your story, how you ended up where you are.
Okay, so been in recruitment, in and out with what people see as recruitment over the last 30 years. Within that, I did a little bit of franchise recruitment, but predominantly it's been working in the recruitment, always for companies. So a mixture of your large global companies and in with that a small boutique company that I worked with for 7 years in London. And no, did I see myself setting on my own? Probably not. But last year, literally days before my 60th birthday, I was pulled into the dreaded meeting to be made redundant. I had a feeling it was coming. So in my mind, I've been prepping what was I going to do. And we'll get into sort of how deeper. I'm sure a little bit as we go along. But I came out of it thinking, can I actually work for somebody else anymore? Not a case of being older and stuck in my own ways, but with what I've learned, do I want to take everything I've learned and now do it on my own? And I thought, you know what, it's now or never. I had a real vision about what I wanted to do, and I knew what I wanted to do wouldn't fit necessarily with a corporate.
Fair play.
So here I am.
Yeah. So you just said a couple of days before your 60th that now, but now the way it's played out. So you're sitting there 59 and counting. 11 months and something, right? Yeah. Thinking, okay, what do I do? I'm 60 years old.
Yeah.
What are some of the thoughts that went through your mind just because of your age?
Okay. If I'm really honest, I was pretty terrified. It was like I'm 60. I've worked in recruitment all my life. We know that there is a place for the older candidate, this kind of thing, but we know it's tough out there equally to encourage companies to get involved with people over 55 really going into the workplace. So I knew it would be tough. And particularly in the recruitment industry, again, been in it for a long time. When you're starting out with a company, it can be pretty much a young person's game. When I was hiring, that was the nature of the beast with it. And when you've been a long time with one company, you start to doubt your abilities. So there was a lot of doubt that came in, imposter syndrome came in. It was like, and it was just initially that thing of, this is it. I'm going to lose everything. Knew I'm not a 60-year-old ready going into retirement. I'm probably going to be your 80-year-old going into retirement just because of who I am, but just what was I going to do? And after a good few weeks of fear about what I was going to do, I sat down and I was like, okay, I've got to think really carefully about this. I've got to think really carefully, what do I want to do? What do I want? All those things that I did before, as in looking at myself and what do I want to represent to people? That was always based on what do I want to represent to people based around my company. Now I was really going to delve in, what do I want to represent to myself? So probably taking on a much younger attitude, because I think a lot of young people do that now.
Wow.
Perhaps my generation, not so much.
Yeah, I want to circle back to something you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And you're so right. You're sitting there in the moment in this fear of the unknown, let's call it that, right? And having spent 30 years in recruiting, you know how the quote unquote hiring companies think. Look, don't jump down my throat, audience, because I know I'm generalizing here, but ageism is a real thing. Not necessarily in every single company,
No.
right? But it is a real thing. And we've seen it, and we've had to, quote unquote, fight the battle for that candidate that's deemed outside of the age range. Forget what laws people put in place. Depending where you're listening
Mm.
from around the world, you're going to listen and say, yeah, that's true. So you've seen that on the play out
Mm.
numerous times, and now suddenly you find yourself in that position.
Mm.
Okay. So that was one thing that I was just like, oh, wow, because I hadn't thought of it like that. And
Mm.
secondly, the other piece you just made, and we were talking about this offline, your identity, I guess. And I know
Mm.
these aren't your words, but it's like, what's the version of Claire that's going out there? Because previously you had been Claire Collins, manager X company Y,
Mm-hmm.
and and so it's been the corporate identity blended in. Now
Mm.
suddenly here you are,
Yeah.
almost, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Well, exactly. And here I am as an adult, sort of suddenly thrown out into the world of like, well, how do I, what do I want to be? And I think it came about quite quickly what I wanted to do for me as a person, how I wanted, what I wanted to, I'm like, what did I need to earn? But equally, this whole work-life balance thing, this the words that we hear all the time, genuinely, what did I want to do? And did I want to be somebody that was going to set up a business on their own, that they were going to build into this sort of multi-million pound business that one day they would sell 3 or 4 years time and it would be my retirement? Or do I want to be a solopreneur, bringing in, a decent living for me and my family, but just really doing that and being quite selective about what I do, and not needing to really, I don't want to say don't not work hard. That's not what I mean at all. But, is it, did I just want to have a nice little business? And that's a really bad term for it, but I think that's one people will probably understand.
So
And
if I can tell you what I'm hearing, sorry to interrupt, but I just
yeah,
want to clarify here. This is what I'm hearing, and I want to make sure
yeah,
that's what you mean.
I'm being clear about, yeah.
Yeah, you were sitting there thinking, I don't need to earn $1 million, but
Yeah,
I need to earn X because I have a lifestyle I'm accustomed to that I
yeah,
choose to continue.
yeah.
Kids, college
Mm,
fund, uni fund, all that stuff. And you looked at it and said, I'm going to choose how hard I work to
yes,
get that income. Not, oh, I
100%.
don't want to work hard.
No, but what do I need for me? And taking nobody else into that. And there's no, I haven't got to sort of hit a certain KPI because I've got to cover the costs of a whole this, that, and the other. And I'm not taking away from that. That's that those are really great
Business.
principles. That's what people want. And I realise that that's not me. I want to work closely with people without having that pressure behind me, so I can relax into that relationship with people. I wanted to look back. I'm going to, if I can, just very quickly, something we were saying about the age bias side of things. And I think something that I realized when I was in it, it's not always actually the company that has ageism. I think us as recruiters can be ageist on
Ooh.
behalf of our clients.
Now this is getting nice and interesting.
I know.
Come
I
on.
think it is very easy to make an assumption that people want to hire people either from the age of sort of starting out from uni or from college or from school up to the age of around 50, 55. That's kind of a ceiling that, you want to work with and can kind of, and this is really interesting, is a lot of what I've been thinking about actually came about from a client that I've remained very, very close with. And he has been very, very generous with talking to me about what he looks for. And, we have very common ground in how we think about things. And he said to me that in a previous country that he worked in, the agency that got all his jobs that he worked incredibly closely with, they specialized in returners to work.
Wow.
And he said he took on more part-time people than any other company he knew around him or any of his colleagues, because he took mum returners, as well as people in redundancy. And I think it's about having, he keeps pushing me to specialize in that because he thinks I'll be great at it. I don't necessarily think I want to necessarily, I don't know yet. Could be. Who knows? At this point, I'm still very early stages
It's
in sort of narrowing down it's very much a niche, and there are more and more people out there. And all the research is showing that companies need to be investing more in the aging population, because the younger population aren't choosing to go into the workforce as quickly as they did generations ago. So it's something that companies need to be looking at. So I think it's a really great conversation, not just for me, but outside.
Yeah, that's a great point, because also thinking of my mum and dad, it was very much okay, retiring at 62. So whatever the age thing was, right? Now 60, like if you look at a lot of the 60-year-olds, right? I'm not that far off.
Yeah.
And I've got more energy than some of the 20, 25, 30-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's also that. But I want to ask you a question before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got somebody listening to whether they're in staffing, whether they're an accountant, this, and they're at that age where they feel too young to retire, or their circumstances won't allow them to retire.
Yeah. A lot of us can't afford to retire.
100%. Was there, I mean, can you give them a tip or two in how they can sit in that own mess, because it is messy, right?
Yeah.
And turn off that noise, and noise being, oh my God, I'm too old for this, I'm, all of that stuff, and really help them say, yeah, I'm going self-employed, or not, as the case may be. Was there something that...
Yeah, I think whether you choose to go self-employed, or, for me, I believe in the UK, it is the small entrepreneur, the small solopreneurs, entrepreneurs within recruitment that are going to really thrive at the moment.
Yep.
It's what people are choosing to work with. And I think we learn a lot of skills. I'm lucky. I went up through the ranks in recruitment and have worked at operational, director level, et cetera, et cetera. So I've gained a lot of business skills. Equally, when I worked in franchising, helping people to set up business, I've learned a lot about business. So I kind of had an understanding of business, of setting up on your own. So I had a little bit more comfort around that. But I think when you mention about just generally finding yourself redundant at the mature end of the stage, 55 plus basically, is really looking and breaking down what you've done, and not just looking at your job title in what you do. When you're just looking at the work piece, look at, everything you've done, what are transferable skills. You'll know with people in recruitment, we don't think we can do anything other than recruitment. It's all we're capable of doing. And that's so not true. There's so many other skills that we have. Utilize AI for that. Put your CV into AI and ask it, what are my transferable skills to take me outside of my current sector? And it will tell, and you can start to learn from that, and it gives you confidence. But, there are transferable skills there. Talk to people, talk to consultants, have honest relationships with a consultant or a mentor or a coach, something like that. Go to a recruitment fair and have honest conversations about age and how you feel, because it's just this conversation, I think, will open doors with people. I think there needs to be bigger conversation about it.
Yep.
It comes, and for individuals. But I think just another part of it is really sitting down and being completely honest about what you want. Yeah. And how is it money? Do I need an X amount of money to come in so I can afford to pay my rent or my mortgage or whatever it might be, put food on the table for the kids? What does that look like? But then what do I want to do from a career? And in recruitment, we talk about empaths and all this kind of stuff, leading with empathy, all that kind of stuff. And it's all just words. But if you genuinely mean that, how can you make that work in your work environment? If you are working as a secretary, what was the key part of that job that what was the bit you loved the most? You know me, I love behavioral assessment. I love team communication, self-awareness, this kind of thing. Look at what you love. I'm laboring the point here. Really think clearly about what makes you tick. Remove all the other stuff, and what could that look like as a job?
I love
But
that. And
equally, I'll tell you one thing I'd like to add. Oh, sorry,
just
Suki.
go.
You know me once I get talking. Another thing as well is if it is just the fact that you need a job so that you can pay the bills, don't be ashamed of that. Do that. You know, we don't all have to have these huge missions and these huge purposes. And, you know, you've got to go out and do this thing that is your passion. You know, if your passion is your out of work life and you just want money to pay the bills, be comfortable and proud about that.
I love this because you're segueing into nicely what we were talking about offline, working hard. Remember that conversation we
Mm-hmm.
had? And I said, well, actually, no, let's reframe that because being self employed, and again, depending on what your ultimate
Mm-hmm.
goal is, starting a business is hard. I
Yeah.
don't care what anybody tells me. It is hard, because, especially coming from big corporate, because
Mm-hmm.
you're used to, or an established, you're used to a brand name, you're used to having quote unquote a marketing. You don't have to think about, well, what ATS do I need? There are all so many things when
Mm-hmm.
you work for somebody, you don't have to think about.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also equally, there's the whole salary. You're getting X salary by company. Now, suddenly you've got no salary. You've got to think about some of those things, although I don't think you have to
Mm-hmm.
think about all of them, but you have to think about some of those things. And when I'm talking to people that are thinking of going self employed, they automatically think whatever their salary was back then, I must earn that because they're still
Yeah.
thinking employee when it comes to money.
Yeah.
Truth of the matter is, again, depending on where in the world you are, when you're self employed, there's so many tax breaks, this. So you actually don't have to have, let's say
Mm.
you're on 100K, you do not have to have 100K,
Yeah.
right? Equally, nothing wrong with if you have 100K. Just like if your goal is 500,000, your goal is 500,000. But if your goal is to sustain your lifestyle, and maybe the real number is 50K, a
Mm.
placement, a quarter, own
100%.
it.
And but the thing is removing that mentality you had where you were perhaps KPI'd in a sales job where it was like you had to have, you know, a placement a week, all of that kind of thing, and it's a mind shift for you. And if you're fortunate, I've been very fortunate that I've had some, you know, I was made redundant. I've been able to have a month or two breathing space to think about these things. But I would say to anybody that, you know, if you're suddenly out of work and you don't have that breathing space financially to give you that comfort to sort of make these decisions, is take the time. If you have to rush into a job, but let's face it, people have to do this. They have to, you know, they've got to pay the bills, so they rush into a job. And this goes to anybody that's working now. Take some personal time to really think about the job you're in. And is it giving you the pleasure that you want? Because often we'll look back and kind of go, like I look at it now and I'm like, why did I not do this sooner? So
That's
I
a
would say
really
to
good
anybody
point.
near my age or a little bit younger than me, I'd say like really think about it and don't leave it too late.
I get that. So, what about those people that have been made redundant
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't get a decent redundancy
Mm.
package, right?
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, for whatever reason, maybe they just got a month's salary,
Yeah.
right? Let's just say
Yeah.
that they don't have time to sit with it, think about it, because month two, they're going into deficit or into
Yeah.
their personal savings and
Yeah.
things like that. So, what would you say to that person? So, are you saying to that person, go get a part-time job
Well,
whilst
yes, there is that solution. There is that,
Mhm.
but there are also a lot of companies out there that support recruitment agencies getting started.
Okay.
Um, so yes, it might involve getting a loan of some sort, but they will take the investment side away. You know, I've also worked in franchising. Look at a franchise maybe where you'll still be with a brand, but you'll be your own business.
Yep.
And then you get some comfort from that. But there are a lot. I mean, I can't speak for other countries. I can only really
Yep.
speak for the UK market on this. But there are a number of companies out there that support startup recruitment agencies by covering costs, and then they have payment. They have plans for how you then repay that back as your business starts to grow. All of this kind of thing. There are ways that you can work this. You know, you can speak to the bank about your experience. But I would say more importantly is if you are facing that redundancy, you know you want to stay in recruitment, but if you look at, I'm trying to think how to best way. If you look at the career you had and you've enjoyed working for another company, then go work for another company. Go out and do your interviews. Not everybody has to go self-employed, but if your gut is, I could be doing this on my own, there are solutions. And talk to people. Jump on. Ping me a message. And I may not have the answer right now, but it's okay. Let's go and find these people. You'll see them on LinkedIn all the time.
Oh, I've got loads of
you probably know a bunch of
yeah,
people that know how that they will give the
specialised.
startup to a recruitment agency. So there is always a route if you really want it. But what I would say is, if you're going to go the self-employed route, you've got to want it. Not just, I think I'll give it a go.
Yeah, I think you just hit on something there. A lot of people automatically just think, I'm going to be self-employed. I don't want to be told what to do, blah, blah, blah. And I get all of that. And they actually underestimate how hard it is to go self-employed. Talk to me about, I can't remember what phrase we used earlier as we were talking offline, where you're sitting in it and to figure it out. Calibrating, I think was the word we used, right?
Calibrating, yeah. I think, I've been with my previous company quite a long time. So I had a fair amount of breathing space. And the risk you have with that is that you can sit thinking and calibrating yourself for quite a long time because you have a little bit of comfort. But we know what you have to remember is that if your self-employment is consultancy, recruitment or not, just consultancy generally, it takes a while to get your money in the bank. I could fill a job tomorrow. It will be a month, sometimes 3 months before that person starts. So you're talking anything from 2 months to 4 or 5 months before I'm going to get paid for that piece of work. That's a reality of just the bankrolling of your business. And you can sometimes sit a little bit, thinking about it a little bit too much. Just get on with it. If you're going to do it, get yourself started.
I think you can, I 100% agree, because I speak to so many people that are in like they've got 6 month redundancy, 2 months redundancy, whatever the case may be. And I say to them, just start, because sometimes you can calibrate so much and then before you know it, it's like, and the doubt comes back in, right? So it depends on what stage you're at. That doubt comes back in. So you have to recalibrate what you've already done.
Yeah, well, we talked this morning, my afternoon, your morning, about the fact that I was having a bit of a blur day.
Yeah.
I was really finding it tough. And the joy of working for another business, I would have got on the phone to one of my colleagues and we'd have had a bit of a chat and I'd be like, okay, I'm on it now. I'm off and running. When you're doing it on your own, you are doing that on your own. And it's really tough. And you just have to, you have to allow yourself to have days like that. But you've really got to use that day to go, okay, what's happening tomorrow? I can honestly say that I probably allowed myself a month longer than I should have done. That's why I can recognize it. I was redundant over Christmas and I had a little money and it was like, oh, I'm going to enjoy Christmas and all these sorts of things. And it was the right thing to do, because you feel battered and bruised. They didn't necessarily batter and bruise me, but you feel that way. You feel battered.
Well, that was a conversation we had when we met up in London and we had lunch, right? That was middle of January or beginning of January. And we were talking about that. And I remember saying to you, Claire, don't sit in this for too long.
And that it was perfect timing for it, because I could have gone another couple of months probably. And equally, I had a good relationship, like I've said, with one with a particular client, and they had a need, so it gets you off and running. Another thing I would say is, when you're starting off, is don't get too caught up in what I call kind of the hard work, but the pretty kind of work. What's my logo going to look like? What's my I'm going to spend months now building my website and that kind of stuff, which is lovely. And you do need these things, but ultimately you need to be getting out and talking to people. And because that's the nice stuff, that's the comfy stuff. And if you've worked operationally, which I did before becoming self-employed, that was a lot of my job. Was the support and the guidance and how we're going to market, how we're going to do this. What I need when I start on my own, it's the recruitment. It's interviewing people, putting CVs forward again.
But last time I checked, Logo never got you an invoice paid, and it didn't pay the
Nope.
mortgage, right?
It's
But
ever so nice doing it, isn't it?
yeah, it's that busy work,
Yeah.
right? Because I say this to my small startup coaching clients
Mm.
all the time. Your logo doesn't have to be perfect. It evolves because you're going to evolve.
Yeah.
Now, 6 years down the road, you can't still be evolving, right?
No.
So, but that's the piece where a lot of us, because I remember that was me. So I've been there, done
Mm.
it, got the t-shirt. In my mind, I'm working on the business. I'm working in the business. No, I'm not. That's
Yeah.
working on the business. That in the business is when you start talking to clients, candidates, and people that are going to pay, help you get an invoice,
Yeah.
right? So there's that piece to it. But I want to circle back to you having a day.
Yeah.
I was like that yesterday. I've not been well recently, and
Mm.
yesterday I got into the office, plowed through 2 o'clock. I hit
Mm.
that wall. I
Yeah.
literally hit that wall, and I go train in. So I rang my husband. I was like, "That's it. I don't even know what I'd done for. 'Cause
Mm.
psychologically, I was not going to leave the office before 4 o'clock. A four
Yep.
o'clock train. So I checked the time. There was two trains before that.
Mm.
Psychologically, I refused to give myself permission to leave the office. But
Yep.
I don't know what I'd done with those 2 hours. Right?
Yep.
But I hit that wall and I got home. I was so tired. And this morning, my husband said, "Take the day off." I was like, "No, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this," and I kind of, so what I'm saying is, don't do what I've just done the last couple of days. But as entrepreneurs, we do that, and when we're working for somebody,
Mm.
you hit a wall. It's okay to have a me day.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think when you go self-employed, you can often you can do it like my reasonings about, like, I want to be a solopreneur. I want to do things sort of my way and have my times that, that are free for me not to work and to work and all of this kind of stuff. But what you find is when you're self-employed, you are just actually doing loads and loads and loads because it's for you and it becomes your baby and all of these sorts of things. And it's sort of balancing those times. But I think just going back to what you were saying about having a good day and making it seem like you're doing your job, is working from home on your own. Working from home for a company, again, you've got teams and you're having all these meetings and all this kind of stuff. When you're on your own, you're on your own. And I go back to my beautiful sister-in-law, who sadly isn't with us anymore. She ran her own business for many, many years, a mortgage business. And I'm adopting her start to the day. And every day she would put her bag on her shoulder from the house, go out, walk to the coffee shop. It was an hour there and back. Walk to the coffee shop, get a coffee, walk back. When she put her key in her door, she said her mindset was, I'm going into work.
Wow.
And she saw
I
it as
like
going
that.
into her office. And she found something to make it work. I'm fortunate. And again, not everybody is. I do have a separate room that is my office. And so I have that when I come in here, I'm at work. So it makes it easier to settle into things. But it's not easy. I mean, I think for, the purpose of what we're talking about today with this sort of like choosing to go self-employed, it isn't an easy decision and it shouldn't be an easy decision. When I say it shouldn't be an easy decision, you need to put thought to it.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just go, oh, I'm going to do this now and I'm going to give it a go. You go in with 100% passion that you're going to make it work, but know what you want to do. But equally, allow yourself to get it wrong. And that's
Oh,
okay.
let's talk about getting it wrong then. Because if we
Yeah.
get it wrong, the buck stops with us.
Yeah. Well, I know that for me, I mentioned it that I want, my business has two sides to it. It is the recruitment piece, and then it is the coaching, career coaching, the self-awareness, team communication, which results in retention sort of side of the business.
Yep.
And that's the bit you've said this, you've known me for many years. And you see me when I talk about this side of the business, how I kind of light up. And I love, and it is very much me as a human being, almost a bit of a rescuer in some respects. So I get real pleasure about seeing other people's success. So that coaching piece really, really sits with me. The recruitment piece also sits with me because I like to see other people getting the career they want. Or
Yep.
when I've got a really great connection with a hiring manager, him or her getting that team they've always wanted. It always revolves around people getting what they need. But initially, I've gone running hell for leather into the recruitment piece because it's the quick piece kind of thing, and not given enough focus to the other. And that was my lesson. It was like, no, hang on a minute. You've got to balance your week. You've got to balance your day so that this piece is getting what it needs as well. Because that is the bit that is you as a human being. And that what I think is what is important when you're doing it on your own is what is the bit of the job that you do that makes you feel good about yourself and you feel really proud that you do it.
But also pays the bill.
Circling back to it a little bit as to people that are thinking about it, I think with self-employment, you've got to really, really want to do the thing you're doing.
Yeah, because it's got to pay the bill. Because ultimately we can do stuff that we love doing, but if it's not going to pay the bills, then it's a hobby. I want to talk about, this is a nice segue again into what we were talking about earlier. As we're recording this, it is, so England, Easter, you have 2 4-day weeks, right? Last week, Good Friday, today, this week, Bank Holiday Monday, 4 days. And you were saying about a bit of an day, your husband's home, your daughter's home, right? And naturally, it's technically a holiday week there for many. You want to go and sit on the deck, sit in the garden and be present. Again, when you're working for somebody, you could have taken this week off, right? Paid vacation, right? Done. So it's that whole mindset piece around that one of how do you balance that with your family? Because in your case, they get it, they understand, they're supportive and stuff like that. But somebody listening to this may not have that luxury and they may, okay, the kids are off school for argument's sake, and they have to be 100% present there. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And you can balance because it's your business, you can balance your day the way you need to so that you can be present, with the family. In fact, you can be flexible when you work with a company as well to do some work in the evening, but the expectation is that you've done your 9 to 5 as well as doing that work in the evening in recruitment. Let's face it, that's a reality. There isn't really recruitment is not a 9 to 5 job. But when everything I do now is accountable to me and my family and what I achieve. So if I had chosen this morning, my husband and my daughter went out this morning for most of the day. I could have chosen to go with them. Nobody could stop me. I could do that. And in fact, my workload meant I probably could have done that because everything I was doing this morning, I probably could do this evening. There weren't any it was predominantly admin stuff that I need to get done. And the deadline on that is a couple of days. So I could have done that tonight if I wanted to. I didn't because of my blur day. I know myself. If I'd gone off on that blur day, I'd have probably had a blur day tomorrow as well and probably think I might as well just have the week with them. So I needed to let them go and do their thing and I had to get into my work mode. It's knowing yourself and being really honest with yourself about things. But I think that is a luxury of the self-employed side of things, is that if I choose to have this week off and it impacts my business, it's my business. Nobody is in the background chirping at me. Nobody's ringing me saying, actually, could you do this while you're off with your family? I will be accountable. If that impacts my business, that is on me. I've chosen not to. I've chosen to be here. I've chosen to work. I've chosen to do this with you. I've chosen to do these things. So that's what I think I needed at my stage in my career. I needed to have control.
You're right, because we could have, with the time difference, if you'd said to me, you know what, I can't record till 8 p.m. tonight, I'd be like, cool, that's only 3 o'clock my time.
Yeah.
Right? It would have not been putting me out.
No.
So you're right, you could have done that. And I like what you just said there. And I kind of almost want to go, the thought going through my head as you were talking, there was 2 words that came into my mind, or 3. Permission. Give yourself permission to take time off.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is the right word, but forgiveness, right? Because it's almost, and I've got to be careful how I articulate this, because you're not forgiving yourself because you've done something wrong. You're forgiving where I'm coming from. The forgiveness piece is cut yourself some slack and grace. Maybe grace is a better word.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Right? You could have chosen to go out with the family today. That's okay. Right? It's not a negative, but to your point, if it becomes a repetitive thing, I'm very much like you. If I'm having a bad day, I wake up and I have to get into action. Because if I don't get into action the first hour or 2, God knows how the day's going to go.
100%.
Right? And then it becomes another bad day and another bad day. Do you miss the people you worked with.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I think I had a very small team. We were all remote, so we were very used to, they were actually in a different country, on a different time
Yep.
zone, this kind of thing. I still keep in touch with them now. They were, but I do miss that regular morning, just check in the mornings with people. And, I am, if people ever do any work with me on the behavioral session, I'm predominantly an extrovert. And by nature, we thrive around people.
Yep.
So not having those around me. So it's about learning techniques to overcome that. If you're that type of person, I'm kind of a mixture. I work very well on my own. I can be very happy not having people around me, but when I need people, I need people. So I'm WhatsApping people all the time. I'll Teams with people, but that's where the part of the job that's going to grow my business comes in, because you just get yourself out networking and talking. I'll talk to anybody. That's kind of, especially I haven't spoken to anybody for a week. God forbid me if you see me on a Friday afternoon after a week at home at a networking event, you won't shut me up. You find ways to overcome that. But yes, I do miss the team. I'll be really honest with you. But I miss my team because I miss the people. I don't miss working as a team.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
That does.
I don't
A human connection.
If I'm really honest, at the stage of I was at my career, I don't miss having those powers that be above.
I like that.
I don't miss that at all. I am where, if I want to do something, I'll give it a go. That kind of thing. I don't have to ask permission, and I've had some brilliant bosses, and actually a mutual friend of ours who is an ex-Direct Line, he talking about getting things wrong and stuff like that. He always recommends a book called Failing Forward. Yeah. And that book had a big impact in the sense of the being it's okay to get it wrong kind of thing. So I've doubled back on something there. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. It's like, yes, I miss my team. I miss the interaction, but I don't miss the pressures that come from being probably senior within. Well, no, actually recruitment is stressful no matter what level you're at. I'm enjoying being accountable, 100% accountable and responsible at the moment.
I love that. So for those listening, Failing Forward is by John Maxwell. Phenomenal book. Love it.
Yeah. Nice short read.
Nice short read. And funny enough, he recommended the same book to me when we first met way back when.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant read. Secondly, I like the fact that it's okay to miss your team. The people doesn't mean you want the quote unquote that accountability, that structure and stuff like that. But also, one of the things that we've done here, especially with the Recruitment Professional Forum, we've created that community for people.
Yeah.
So look for online communities.
Yeah.
Or if you want to do face-to-face, look for local, quote unquote meetups or whatever.
Yeah, coffee mornings for businesses, the coffee network events, those sorts of things. They're great.
That's it. Get a mentor, get a coach. It really depends what you need, because contrary to what people think, and I know there's going to be a lot of people angry, like, no, Suki, you're wrong there. And that's okay. This is my opinion. That's yours. A coach is not a coach is not a coach, right? Because yes, there's certain things you need. Or go and find a coach that has that particular piece.
Yeah.
Right. Just because I'm a coach for the recruitment industry, I will never be coaching somebody who's opening a pharmacy. Where the hell pharmacy came from, I don't know, because I don't have the industry. I, as a coach, don't feel I have the industry expertise.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you may need somebody that's pure 100% mindset. Then go and find somebody whose specialization is mindset. Right. So your needs are going to change and evolve, but there are plenty of resources. And earlier on, you were talking about companies that will invest, incubators and things like that. I have a whole list of them. Depends where you are in the world. Right. There's so many different options out there. In fact, I've got a podcast that was just released before this one airs. And all we're talking there is, how do you finance your own business? How do you finance a staffing agency?
Yeah.
The different ways to do that. So I'll loop that one in here as well.
Yeah.
It's a scary road, and it's not for everybody.
It's not. It is really scary. But I think, going back to sort of your original opening with me about, was very much around me. Like I said, I'm not ashamed to say that I'm 60, like hitting redundancy at that stage of life. 20, 30 years ago, the natural thing would be that I would retire. And that's just not the case anymore. And that's a great thing, because I saw it with my father who retired early due to redundancy. He was an old fashioned factory worker. He got made redundant and didn't do anything. And I think it was the worst thing that ever happened to him. And, he didn't die super young, but, he lost all sense of purpose. And I don't think we have to have that now. If you were my age and you've reached the point and you kind of go, do you know what, I'm just going to retire. Fantastic. If you got a redundancy similar age to me, and you go, right, okay, I want to go be self-employed, do it. It's liberating. And, you'll be proud of yourself for doing it, and go build something amazing. If you want to go and work for another company, go and do it. The age, it's really important that age shouldn't be an issue now, because we're living longer. We are, our bodies are younger than they've ever been. Our brains are, you don't have to retire just because you've hit 60. And allow yourself to be scared.
And
it's almost like grief. Do the scared bit, do the fear, the anger. I was really angry for a long time. It was all their fault. How dare they make me redundant, that kind of stuff. It's not. I've been in the position where I've had to make people redundant before, and I've been made redundant. These decisions are made for a reason, and I may not like it, but these decisions are made.
Usually nothing to do with you.
No, but it's the job role that's gone, not me personally. Not always the case, but but basically allow yourself to have these feelings, but don't wallow into them, and do what you want to do.
You've been 6 months, 5 months since you got made redundant?
Just coming up for 6 months.
Just coming up for 6 months. Did they do you a favour making you redundant?
Yes. It still feels scary when you say it out loud. It still feels scary because I'm still very early days of setting up my business, but fear is healthy for us. It gets the adrenaline up. But they did. They did me a favor, because I would have stayed in an employed role because of my age, not necessarily because I wanted to.
Yeah,
and that
is
so
fair
powerful on me. And in reality, it wouldn't have been fair to them either.
That is so powerful, right?
So they've got their own roles, and it did us all a favor, and
because you show up differently, right? When you're there because you're quote unquote pulling a paycheck. Not saying that's what you were doing, but you show up differently. And just the fact that 6 months later, you're able to look at it and say, had that not happened, you would not have your business.
Yeah. And I think if I'm really, really honest as well, it was really ingrained in me corporately that I showed up slightly different than the real Claire Collins.
Oh, I want to touch on this before we wrap up. Talk to me more about that.
And that is really, for some people, might seem quite superficial. The way I dressed at work is not how I dress. And if I'd shown up, even on a casual event, in my true casual clothes, I think I felt it would have been frowned on. I mean, I've had things happen to me through my life, not in my last company, but in my early days. I wear glasses, not on camera, but for distance, I wear glasses. And I do like a funky set of glasses. And I'm talking probably 20, 30 years ago when funky glasses weren't really the norm. They are now. It wouldn't have been a bother. But I remember having white blonde hair. I was working in Notting Hill with media companies, white blonde hair and black glasses. And I had a regional manager. He came into my office one day and said, Claire, do you really have to wear those glasses? And I kind of said, well, yeah, I'm kind of blind without them. But, that probably in itself impacted how I dressed at work, because I was like, hang on, no, I can't be myself because it's frowned upon. Again, I think perhaps that's a generational thing. I think perhaps younger people, it doesn't, are much stronger around being their own person in the work environment now. But just those little things about me, when people are meeting me, they're meeting, to quote Eminem, they're meeting the real Claire Collins.
Wow. That's a friggin' awesome point to end it on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I put it on my LinkedIn. I was never allowed to beat to my own drum, but now I am.
Wow. That is friggin' awesome. So, people listening to this, they want to work with somebody who thinks like you. How do they get hold of you?
They get hold of me on LinkedIn. They can email me. They can put a comment in there, in one of my posts. Obviously, the LinkedIn thing is there. Ammolite Consulting is the name of the business. And I've done that terrible thing. I don't have my phone number and my email. They can email me, Claire, CLAIRE, at ammoliteconsulting.com. And yes, Ammolite is a crystal. I'm a little bit of a win-win crystal person as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Because actually we should add, you're not just UK based, you're recruiting in Europe, North America. So I think that we should add that.
Yeah, I've got experience globally. I was going to actually bring that up when you mentioned time zones. Time zones are not an issue for me. Family globally, contacts globally. So feel free.
Fantastic. Claire, thank you
for having
ever
me.
so much. Thank you for sharing
you.
your journey with us. And I hope the audience, the listeners have found this of value.
Yeah,
I'm sure they
and
have.
if they want to have a chat just about this very thing, about, making a decision, I'm always happy. You know me. I'll get my chat in.
Thank you ever so much, Claire.
Thank you.
Chat to you soon. Take
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talent Titans, brought to you by Recruitment Professional Forum, where they're building a grassroots community for professionals and leaders in the recruitment industry to collaborate, advocate, and advance the profession. If you liked or were inspired by what you heard, make sure to follow, subscribe, and even leave a review. It lets more talented recruiters like you find the show. Until next time, keep on being a talent titan.